Look at what's on the table in front of me right now. It's a fish, pulled cold and silver out of a river not 2 hours ago, back stiffening in the chill, and it is one of the finest-looking things you could ever hope to catch when your belly's gone tight and empty. Fat, oily, rich, the kind of fish a hungry man's eyes light up at. And I'm going to tell you something that ought to stop you right where you sit. A fish exactly like this one, pulled out of a cold, clear river by men who knew that country better than you or I ever will, killed more of them than the rapids did. Killed them slow, killed them days after they ate it, when the river was long behind them and they thought they'd gotten away clean. Now I know how that sounds. A man looks at a fat river fish and he sees a meal, sees salvation, sees the one good thing in a hard week. He does not see a grave. So stay with me here, because I'm looking you in the eye when I say this. The thing that killed those men wasn't the river, and it wasn't bad luck, and it wasn't some rare poison you'd never come across. It was the fish itself, cooked and eaten the way any sensible hungry man would cook it and eat it. And the fix, the thing that would have carried every one of them home to their families, cost nothing at all. Not a dollar, not a dime. It was free, and it's the very thing almost every man alive today would do the exact opposite of. So keep listening, because once you understand what I'm about to lay out for you, you will never look at a fish pulled out of cold water the same way again. And I want to plant something in your mind right at the start, because it's the whole riddle of the thing. These men who died, a lot of them didn't die by the water. They died a day later, 2 days later, sometimes more. Strong men. Men who'd eaten the same kind of fish 100 times before and been fine. I'm going to show you exactly how a healthy man eats a good meal and lies down dead 3 days on. But not yet. Hold on to that, because it matters more than anything else, I'll tell you. Let me tell you who I am first, so you know I'm not reading this off some card. I've run a trap line. I've wintered alone in country where the nearest other living soul was 2 days of hard walking down a frozen river, eating whatever I could pull out of the water or snare in the brush, and going hungry the nights I came up empty. That's the only way this old knowledge ever truly sticks to a man. By needing it. The old hands who taught me didn't learn it from any book either. They learned it standing over friends who'd gone stiff and cold, with good food still in their bellies, trying to work out what in God's name had happened. And if you're getting something out of this, do me one small kindness and tap that subscribe button and give this a like, and hit that notification bell while you're at it, because these old lessons are getting scrubbed off the face of the earth, and I aim to keep them alive as long as I've got breath to do it. Now here's the first thing most folks have flat backward. They think a fish is about the safest thing you can eat out in the wild. Clean water, cold water, a fish swimming in it. Pull it out and cook it over your fire and you're set. And most of the time, most places, that's true enough. But it's the exception that buries you, and the exception is a specific fish in a specific season doing a specific thing your body was never built to handle. Lean in close for this next part, because if this piece doesn't land in you, nothing else I say tonight will keep you standing. The fish that kills isn't rotten. That's what folks get wrong right off. They hear a man died from eating fish, and they think he ate spoiled meat, ate something turned and stinking, and any fool would have known better. No, this fish looked perfect. It smelled clean. It cooked up fine, and it tasted good going down. Some of the deadliest of them were caught fresh and eaten the same hour, silver bright and firm. The danger was never in the freshness. The danger was in what that fish carried inside it, invisible, waiting, riding along in flesh that looked as wholesome as anything you ever put on a plate. Here's the shape of it. Certain fish out of certain waters carry a thing inside them, a passenger, a small living thing that means the fish no harm at all. The fish carries it easy, swims along fine, never the worse for it. But that passenger is only halfway through its journey, and its journey ends inside a man. You eat the fish, you take the passenger in with it, and now it's home. Now it goes to work. And it does not go to work that same night while you're licking the grease off your fingers and feeling grateful. It sets up quiet, and it grows, and it waits, and by the time it makes itself known, you've walked 20 miles from where you caught the thing, and you've got no earthly idea the fish is what's killing you. Sit with that a moment, because it's the cruelest part. A poison you eat and die from that same night, well, at least a man knows what got him. He can warn the next fellow. But a thing that waits days before it turns on, you breaks the chain. The man can't connect the fish to the dying. So the lesson never gets learned proper, and the next hungry man pulls the same fish out of the same water and does the same thing, because nobody ever managed to point at the fish and say, that's the one. Now, the native people, the ones who'd lived on these rivers 1,000 winters running, they hardly ever died this way. And it wasn't luck, and it wasn't a stronger stomach. It was knowing. They knew which waters ran clean and which ran foul. They knew that a fish and the water it swims in are the same story, that a fish out of a slow, still, warm, mucked-up backwater is a different animal entirely from one pulled out of fast, cold current, even if the two looked like twins on the bank. They knew a fish caught in the warm dead of summer out of low, sluggish water carried more risk than the same fish pulled through the ice in the dead of winter, and they timed their eating to the water and the season both. And most of all, they knew what fire does and doesn't do, and they never once trusted their eyes over their knowledge. The ones who died were the newcomers, the trappers and the explorers and the settlers who learned how to catch the same fish but never bothered to learn how to eat it. They came into that country lean and hungry and in a hurry, and hunger is a poor teacher and a worse cook. They copied the catching, and they skipped the wisdom entirely, and that one missing piece is the whole difference between a full belly and a shallow grave. So here's the knowing, and I'll hand it to you in layers, the same way it was handed to me, because dumping it all at once would rob it of its weight. The first layer flips your whole head around, and it's this. Fire is not the shield you think it is. A man builds his fire, he cooks his fish through, sees it go from wet and clear to white and flaking, and he believes, down in his bones, that the fire has made it safe. Heat kills what ails you, that's what he's been taught his whole life. And for a great many things that's true. But that passenger I told you about, the one riding in the flesh, a quick fireside cooking does not always reach it. A fish seared black on the outside can be barely warmed at the center, right along the bone, and that's exactly where the danger likes to sit. So the man eats what he's certain is a cooked-through, safe, hot meal, and he has in truth swallowed the thing alive. The fire lied to him, or rather, he lied to himself and blamed the fire. And that brings me to something I need you to do right now if you haven't. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on the notification bell. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking because the folks who need these old lessons don't get shown them unless enough of you tell the machine this is worth showing. So take the half a second and do it, and then stay right here, because the next layer is the one almost nobody gets right. The second layer is about the water, and it goes like this. You judge the water before you ever judge the fish. A fish is only ever as clean as the river it came out of, and the water tells you near everything if you know how to listen. Fast water, cold water, water tumbling over stone and breaking white. That water is scrubbing itself clean every foot it travels. But slow water, still water, water sitting warm and green in a low backwater with the bank all mucked and soft. That water is a nursery for every foul thing that wants to ride into a man. 2 fish, one from the fast cold run, and one from the still warm slough, might look like the very same fish on your line. They are not the same fish. One of them is supper, and one of them is a gamble with your life, and the only way to tell them apart is to have watched the water they came from. The third layer feels almost too simple once you learn it, and it's the one the old hands leaned on hardest. When you don't know the water, you cook that fish long, and you cook it slow, and you cook it all the way through to the bone. Not a quick sear over a hot flame that chars the skin and leaves the middle cool. You break the fish down, you cook it in pieces, you let the heat work its way clear into the deepest part of the flesh and hold it there. Better yet, you boil it. A fish boiled hard in a pot for a good long while gives up its danger the way a quick grilled one never will, and it hands you a second gift besides, because all that rich fat and goodness cooks out into the broth, and you drink that down and waste nothing. The old hands boiled their fish for a reason, and it wasn't because they couldn't work a fire. It was because they'd buried men who trusted a fire. And now circle back to what I told you to hold on to. That riddle of how a healthy man eats a good meal and dies 3 days later. Here's the whole of it laid plain, and once you see it, the rest locks into place. That passenger settles into a man and it grows, and as it grows, it takes and it takes, robbing him quiet from the inside, or it moves into a place in him it was never meant to be, and it blocks up the works. And all the while the man feels only a little off, a little tired, a little wrong in the gut. Nothing a hard-living man wouldn't shrug at. So he keeps walking. He keeps working. He doesn't rest and he doesn't fix it because he doesn't know there's a thing to fix. And by the time it lays him flat and undeniable, days on, the damage is dug in too deep to climb back out of. He didn't die of a bad meal. He died of a good meal that carried a passenger, and of not knowing to fear a fish that tasted just fine. That gnawing wrongness the old accounts describe, men going hollow-eyed and weak days after a fine catch, sickening slow with no wound and no fever anyone could name. That wasn't bad luck and it wasn't a curse. It was the fish, working on its own patient clock in a body that never once suspected it. Now, we're past the hard part, and I want you to do that thing for me one more time, because we're deep enough in now that you know I'm giving you the real goods and not wasting your evening. Tap subscribe, hit that like, and switch on the notifications. It costs you nothing, and it keeps this old knowledge from going in the ground for good. You're probably wondering by now why nobody ever told you this, why it isn't just plain common knowledge. And the answer is quiet and true, and has nothing to do with any conspiracy. A piece of survival wisdom only stays alive as long as folks actually need it. The day the wagon road reached the valley, the day a man could buy his fish, gutted and inspected and wrapped in paper, the day the store threw open its doors, the knowing started to fade. Because nobody pays to remember a rule they'll never have to use. Then it got worse, the way it always does. The modern world took the fear clean out of a fish and sold you the fish without the fear, and now a man raised on grocery store salmon steps out onto a wild river with a lifetime of no reason to worry, and every reason in the world, too. There's no money in teaching a man to be careful of a thing that's free for the taking. There's plenty of money in selling him the thing already cleaned. So the caution got crowded out, not by a cover-up, just by the quiet arithmetic of what sells. Now let me be straight with you, the way I'd want a man to be straight with me, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. I won't dress this up bigger than it is. This is not coming for most of you, because most of you are not going to be pulling your supper out of an unknown river 3 days from the nearest help. You've got a kitchen and a road and a store down the way. To actually die of this, you'd have to be living off the land, off strange water, cooking quick over a fire because you're cold and starving and in a hurry, the way a lost man or a stranded traveler ends up. Not the way you're sitting comfortable right now, warm and dry with the lights on. I won't tell you it's coming for you, and I won't have you leaving here spooked at your own dinner plate. What I will tell you, though, is that every man it ever came for felt just as safe and just as sure and just as far from harm, right up until the fish had him. And I won't skip the one hard fact that proves I'm not spinning you a campfire tale, because this is documented better than almost any old lesson I know. The people who lived along the great cold rivers of the north carried this fear in their bones, and they built their whole way of eating fish around it, drying it and freezing it hard and boiling it and knowing their waters, precisely because they had watched what a careless meal could do. When a whole people orders their entire way of life around a single rule, you can take that rule straight to the bank. This isn't legend. It's a lesson paid for in lives over and over until it became simple habit for the ones wise enough to keep it. So here's how you carry the whole of it, not as fear, but as a plain way of doing things. You read the water before you ever judge the fish, because a fish is only as clean as the river it swam in. You favor the fast, cold, running water over the slow, warm, still water every single time. You never trust a quick sear to make a strange fish safe, because the fire warms the outside long before it reaches the heart of the thing. You cook it long and low, clear through to the bone, and better yet you boil it and drink the broth and waste nothing. And when you can't be sure, you err toward the fire and the pot every time, because a fish overcooked has cost a man nothing but a little of its softness, while a fish undercooked has cost men everything they had. None of it costs a dime. And that's the part I love most, because the very thing that saves your life is patience and knowing and a little more time over the fire, the plainest, cheapest things a man can carry. The whole secret was sitting there in the water the entire time, free for anyone humble enough to learn it. Maybe that's the real lesson, the one bigger than fish and bigger than rivers. Those men didn't die because the water was cruel. The water was only ever just the water. They died because they were certain. Certain a fish is a fish. Certain that clean-looking is clean. Certain that a fire makes all things safe. Certain they already knew the one thing they didn't know at all. The wilderness never kills the humble man half as fast as it kills the sure one. The old hands feared their own certainty more than they ever feared the cold or the current, and that's a thing I'd hand down to you ahead of any trick. So there it is, the whole of it, small enough to carry and free as the water running by. Read the river before the fish. Favor the fast, cold water over the slow, warm. Never trust a quick sear on a strange fish. Cook it long, cook it deep, boil it when you can. And when in doubt, more fire, not less. Do that much and the country can hand you its richest, finest-looking catch, and you'll still walk home come spring. Now, before I let you go, do that last thing for me, because if this kept you here to the end, it's earned it. Subscribe, hit that like, and turn on the notification bell, so the next fellow who needs this finds it before the river teaches him the hard way. The people who settled this land with their 2 hands and a knife knew 1,000 things like this, hard won and handed down and nearly lost, and I won't stand by and watch them go into the ground. So tell me down in the comments, what's the one piece of food wisdom your own people carried that the rest of us have plain forgotten? Because I want to hear it. And next time, I've got another one for you that runs dead against everything common sense tells you. It's about water. The water that looked cleanest and ran coldest and clearest right off the high country. The water that looked so pure and inviting you'd drink it without a second thought. And how that very water put strong men flat on their backs for a week and worse. There was a way the old hands had of reading it before they ever filled a cup. And it wasn't the smell and it wasn't the look. I'll show you what it was. Until then, take care of your fire, and don't ever trust a fine-looking fish to tell you the truth.